Now, I want to start the show on a kind of somber note today because at age 70, Paul Reubens, otherwise known as Pee Wee Herman, is dead. Now, this happened on Monday, so it's not exactly breaking news, but I figured it would be important for those of you who watched Pee Wee Herman growing up and know the show as a very odd, incredibly eccentric show loaded with sexual innuendo. And if you don't know, take a trip down memory lane and look on YouTube for some of the sexual innuendo in Pee Wee Herman, and then you'll see how incredibly weird the show was. You'll come away thinking, why in the world did my parents ever let me watch this show? But then you'll also notice a one-of-a-kind talent in Paul Reubens there. Pee Wee himself has passed on. Now, in other odd news, because the only reason I told that story is just to set you up for a very weird story, unlike anything I've ever told on the show before, but one that I think needs to be pointed out. A manatee just recently died, and I want to tell you why. So, according to Yahoo News, beloved Florida manatee's death at aquarium came after traumatic sex injury records show. That's right. Show opener today, manatee sex. Now, bear with me for just a moment because I'm going to tell you why this manatee died, and then all will become very clear. So hang with me here. So the story goes on to say, the death of Hugh, a 38-year-old manatee who died in April at Sarasota, Florida's Manatee Marine Aquarium and Laboratory, could have been prevented, according to new records that detail the beloved animal's death. Now, already, very, very sad note. We could have prevented this beautiful animal's death. Well, how could we have prevented that exactly from this sex injury? Hugh died from a 14.5 centimeter rip in his colon and other traumatic injuries caused by a sexual encounter with another, larger male manatee at the facility. All right, there it is. That's the story. So apparently, Hugh was accosted by another male manatee and forced to have anal sex in a 14.5 centimeter, which is a very big cut, by the way, in his colon, killed the poor guy. Now, that not only is one of the most horrible ways to go out, but you might be able to tell in advance kind of where I'm going here. And just to prove that you get stories here that you don't find anywhere else, I wanted to give you this story. But here's the first point about this unfortunate story and Hugh's passing. He will be missed. Feminism has taught us through the sexual revolution that casual sex is a means to find real freedom. Hopefully by now we can tell that casual sex has led to a litany of STIs and STDs, has led to these kind of encounters that we saw with our friend Hugh here, and all sorts of other things. It should be well known at this point, well documented at this point, that the proliferation of OnlyFans has only caused men to have less testosterone, less real kind of engagement with actual real girls, and a inability to function as a real man in society because he's too interested in staying in his room all hours of the night looking at girls that will never have anything to do with him. So casual sexual freedom has actually not been freeing at all. It's actually been incredibly devastating. It's only sad that I have to show you the death of Hugh to get to this place with you all. Now, the other point about the sexual revolution that I think is important to remind ourselves of is that the sexual revolution taught us that consent is the ultimate virtue. As long as you can consent to anything, well, then by all means do it. This is where we got kind of the argument in the 90s with the gay marriage argument that, hey, what do you care about what two consenting adults do in their bedroom? How is that any of your business? Well, when it's tearing 14.5 centimeter, tears in people's colon, it does cause an issue. So at least for Hugh's sake, we really care, and our hearts go out to Hugh's family. Now, one of the reasons that we care beyond the damage, which I'll get to in just a minute, that anal sex actually causes, is we care about the idea beyond that first of all, you can redefine marriage to just basically be anything you want. So does that mean polygamy and marriage to a child? That's marriage and they're all the same? And why even have those laws on the book if there isn't actually a clear-cut, real definition of marriage? Beyond that, the idea that consent is the ultimate virtue and not morality is the real problem here. So the idea that as long as two consenting adults consent to something, then it's fine, is a ridiculous notion, because there is a greater virtue above consent, because you can consent to anything. And two consenting adults, I mean, do we forget that crazy people exist? Anyway, the ultimate virtue here is not consent, it's morality. This is kind of the problem with the whole Me Too movement, is that consent is kind of a funny thing. It's a real, frankly, arbitrary idea, because we don't know who was consenting to sex with Harvey Weinstein so that they could make it a little bit further in their career. And we don't know the people who were forced to do it. All we're left to do is consider basically the feelings of an individual in the moment, what they actually said and what they actually did and all of that stuff. And I'm not trying to condone anything that either party has done in that whole scenario. I'm just trying to tell you this. A much more clearer and concise way to view things in society is not through the lens of consent. Just because you're a consenting adult doesn't mean that you get to do whatever you want. The ultimate virtue is obviously not consent, it's morality, that which is right. The reason we don't like morality is because it pushes us to religious thought, and most people don't want that as a truly limiting principle. But feminism has taught us to throw off the Puritanism of the past and the patriarchy and all forms of kind of inhibition in our sexual desire, to push those all to the side, because that's just men trying to control who you are. When in point of fact, we might be discovering now in the present that some of those quote unquote puritanical, ideas about sex might have actually been a really good safeguard in society, because the final point in all of this is that one of the things that you just won't hear on other shows, and probably perhaps where you thought I was going with this from the very beginning if you were kind of being intuitive, is that you will never hear about the danger of redefining sex. And in this case in particular, you will never hear about the dangers of anal sex, because it's actually a very, very dangerous sexual practice. It's actually associated as one of the most dangerous sexual practices that can be participated in. And for that, I want to take you to a Guardian article to confirm the very idea. Now, to bring you the danger of redefining sex, I had to really, really search and bring you kind of an interesting article, because you all know that there can't be any serious outlet that condemns anal homosexual sex, because, of course, GLAAD will come after them and sue them the very next day. Even though it is considered one of the most dangerous sexual practices, there is nobody that has, in the mainstream media at least, the kind of courage and the boldness that it takes to actually tell you the truth about the dangers of anal sex. So to do that, I had to go all the way to the Guardian and find a feminist article defending women who are having heterosexual anal sex, and then read what they have to say about this issue, because it is actually very, very dangerous. So this article is just simply trying to protect women, but in the process, the mask slips a little bit, and they actually tell you the truth about this very dangerous sexual practice. And it says this, quote, "The consequences of anal sex include incontinence and sexually transmitted infections, as well as pain and bleeding because they have experienced bodily trauma." So in other words, anal sex is tantamount to bodily trauma while engaging in the practice. The doctors write in an article in the British Medical Journal. Tabitha Ghana and Leslie Hunt also argued that doctors' reluctance to discuss the risks associated with anal sex was leading women to being harmed by the practice and letting down a generation of women who are not aware of the potential problems. Now, what exactly would cause these doctors and other experts to have hesitancy discussing the dangers of anal sex? I'll give you about 3 seconds to come up with the answer, because that's all it's going to actually take for you to really know why they won't talk about how dangerous and how bad it is for you. Now, let's just agree here. Maybe agree to disagree with some of you who are on the far left, that simulating a vagina is probably a bad idea. God gave women what they needed for men. To try to reverse engineer the exit as the entrance is a very troubling and potentially harmful practice. We're not told this enough by anybody in the mainstream, and so here you are, relegated to hearing it from me. Yes, a Christian evangelical conservative, finally pleading with you all to pay attention to what is right in front of your face. That when you do things that violate nature, there is a repercussion for it all. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely want to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.